Shep, you have been a member or a president or a chair of committees of literally hundreds of organizations nationally and locally. Bar associations, church organizations, fraternal organizations, the list goes on and on. Of all the organizations of which you've been a member, tell us the ones that affected you the most as it relates to your law career and probably influenced you the most.
Well, of course, the bar association certainly influence you a great deal because you see your peers and you want to model after the good works that they perform and try to have the highest ethical standards and to do your work in the most professional way. The church has always been a hard rock foundation for me, and also family. My family's always been very supportive, and my mother, my grandmother, and grandfather, and Dad, whenever I could see much of him, but he was always back and forth to the place. And I have loving brothers and sisters, and of course my dear wife. And I've gotten a lot out of my college experience, and also scouting. I thought was one of the finest training grounds for any young man, period.
How long have you been a scout?
Since I was 12 years old, so I've been from 12 until 80, so I've been a scout, say, for 68 years.
You've been president of the ABA, the TBA, Memphis Bar Association, so many organizations. Would you still consider scouting probably to be right up there at the top?
It certainly is, because I got a great deal out of scouting, and a great deal out of the church and family and all these organizations. You know, everything contributes to you in some way. And you know that old saying that is so hackneyed, you've heard it so much about the lawyers at Harrison Tweed, you know, the Bar Association of the City of New York. He said, I have the greatest tribute for lawyers with all their faults. They are better to work with, to fight with, to play with, to drink with, than most other groups of mankind. And I think that's true.
You were in naval intelligence, and so you understand the necessity of doing a background check on people, particularly people you interview. I did a little background checking on you.
Uh-oh.
And one of the interesting things that I learned about your career, particularly your legal career, is that you were an Eagle Scout, and as you said, you enjoyed the Boy Scouts. If that's the case, then why did you sue the Boy Scouts of America?
Where did you pick that up? Well, that was a good, yeah, the Boy Scouts of America, the Chickasaw Council, had a nominating committee, and they would not, NOT, allow any other nominations. So a number of us, Charlie Crump and I and some others, met one Saturday down at the William Lynn Hotel, and I had a piece of paper there, and I started drawing up a complaint, and we went down there and sued in Chancery Court. Ceylon Frazier was the chancellor, and we said, one, that we wanted to be able to have nominations other than the set nominations, and two, we wanted to use proxies because the statute allowed it. And he had a big hearing, and it got national publicity, and some lawyer from New York City came down to defend, and he agreed with us, but he said, regardless of proxies, we are not going to have proxy voting. So
what year was this about?
Oh, good gracious, I guess, Paul, I don't know how many years ago that was. That was early on.
What decade, do you remember? 60s?
Oh, I think in about the 60s.
I understand from talking with Charlie Crump that as a result of that lawsuit, it probably changed the way the Scouts did business for the rest of, not only that year, but in Futuro.
Perhaps so. In other words, there's no reason in the world just to have a set nominating committee and not let anybody else make any nominations. And we didn't think it was proper, and the chancellor agreed with us.
Well, I thought that was a pretty interesting story
Yeah,
about your dedication to the Boy Scouts. The church has been, the Episcopal Church particularly,
That's
as you
correct.
said, has been very
Yeah.
important to you. Has it been like that all of your life?
Yes, it has, because as long as I can remember, we always went to Sunday school and in the church and the Easter services. And talk about scouting, Shep said that I forced him to do two things. He said I forced him to get his Eagle badge, and I forced him to keep on as an acolyte in the church until he was a little older. And he did both of those things, and he appreciates it now. But at that time, he had other interests in life that came along. Reminds me of the two little boys that were talking. One of them said, "How old are you, 4 or 5?" And the first guy said, "The girls bother you?" He said, "No, you 4." I think this was Shep's concern. And I said, "You're going to keep going until you get both of those jobs done."
What are the rewards and the advantages of being a lawyer from your perspective?
I think the personal satisfaction that you get from the thought that you've helped someone. And the disappointment is sometimes people don't think that you have helped them as much as they had hoped that you had helped them, and that you try to be an influence and a model and an aid to anybody else who's coming on in the practice of law. And the sad thing, I think, is that it's gotten there because there's so great concern about that. You have these codes of professional conduct, codes of ethics, and all of these things. Notwithstanding, you have either the ABA Model Code of Professional Conduct, or the ABA Model Rules of Professional Conduct, or the ABA Code of Professional Conduct, and it's hard to see that everyone follows those. I was impressed. A friend of mine, Chesterfield Smith, who'd been the ABA president, and we both had been president of the National Conference of Bar Presidents, and were good friends, and he wanted me to keep active, and he said, "I'm going to appoint you as the head of a brand new committee called the ABA Standing Committee on Professional Liability, Professional Competence." And I mentioned that to John Morton. He said, "Well, every professional discipline, I mean," and he said, "Every lawyer's going to be after you for what you might be doing." I didn't accept that. And right after that, we had Watergate, and there were lawyers, you know, they said they were amazed how many lawyers were involved. And we had to work through that, work through my friend Leon Jaworski, who said that he was going to make sure that he wasn't going to get an indictment unless he could get a conviction. He said an indictment might ruin somebody. And said, "Shep, you can rest assured, if I get an indictment, I'm going to get a conviction." And he had a fellow named Philip Lacavara who worked closely with us. And right after that, we went all through the country working with various disciplinary groups, judges and the like, to set up a model of professional discipline. And that was adopted by the ABA. Then we did the same thing for judicial discipline, and it was adopted by the ABA. And we'd pick up something good here and pass it on here, and you know, you'd put it all together, and we had national conferences and regional conferences on it. So I got a lot of satisfaction out of that.
Watergate occurred in 1974, 75 time frame. Do you think Watergate had an effect on the legal profession?
Oh, I think so, because one thing, people were amazed that so many lawyers were involved, but the other thing is it strengthened the disciplinary system, because someone at that time, I'm just not saying this is the state that was involved, might go from New York out to California, and that lawyer might have been in violation of some code up in New York, and maybe had been censored or disbarred and so forth, and there was no registry, so you could know that that was a problem when he went out and started practicing in California. So they worked up a network. We recommended and created the National Center for Professionalism in the ABA. And so they put all of this together on computers so they know what persons are practicing in what states and whether or not there's been any censors or disbarments or complaints and so forth. And they have national conferences to help all the professional responsibility groups.
Lawyers are often criticized about not policing themselves. Do you think lawyers are properly disciplined and policed in America?
I think the answer is yes, although the perception is not there. And I think maybe some people get away with it and then the complaint has not been made against them. And now one thing that's helped with the perception of doing a better job is, I won't give you a statistic, but so many of the disciplinary boards alike have individuals who are laypersons on that, so they don't think it's just the lawyers protecting the lawyers. They have laypersons on there, and they can give their opinions and pass the word. Well, look, I'm on that board, and we look at it very carefully. And I think that's helped a great deal.
In Tennessee, are lawyers disciplined properly, and how does Tennessee rank nationally so far as policing their own?
Paul, I don't know that. Let me put it this way. You know, every lawyer in Tennessee, you and everybody else, has a certain number, you know, your professional code number. And even in pleadings, you put your number down. And they, Lawrence Bracey puts out a report each year, you know, how many complaints there have been and how many have been dismissed, or how many have had censors, or how many people have been disbarred and the like. And I don't have any present statistics as how we rate percentage-wise with other states, but I know of people who have been on these various hearing committees, as my son has, and I think from what I understand, they're doing a very fine professional job.
Do you like the business part of practicing law?
No.
Explain.
I was out playing tennis one day, doubles as a matter of fact, and they called me off the court. I said, look, I'm playing, well, Justin Stanley, president of the American Bar Association, is calling. I said, okay. So I excused myself. I said, Justin, I'm playing tennis. He said, I want you to do a favor for me. I said, what's that? He said, you know, they got this case in the Supreme Court, State Bar of Arizona versus Bates and Osteen, and nothing is coming down during my administration, I'm assured. I don't think it is. But would you be standing by to head up a commission to make a reaction to whatever they come about on? I said, okay, let me go back and play tennis. He said he knew nothing, and I'm sure he didn't. The next day, that next Monday, the Supreme Court came out with that opinion.
Tell us about that opinion.
Well, the opinion in a nutshell was that the Bates and Osteen were disciplined by the State Bar of Arizona because they advertised. And the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 opinion, said that they were able to do that. That was part of First Amendment free speech. And so I was appointed head of this group, and we had laypersons and others on it, and we had hearings from the media and everything, and we came for the ABA House of Delegates, which is the ruling body of the ABA during the interim, of course, the Board of Governors Act, and we came up with two proposals. One was the regulatory, which said that you can put into an ad anything, 1, 2, 3 foreign languages, where you were graduated and all this and that, or any other information that your regulatory agency permits. And the other proposal was that you could do anything that wasn't false, fraudulent, misleading, and the like. And the ABA, which is just a recommending body, you know, to the other state and local bars, adopted what we had wanted, and yet we weren't unanimous in our committee, the regulatory arrangement. And then more and more states said you could do anything you wanted to, it wasn't false, fraudulent, misleading. And that, I think, has caused a lot of advertising to come out that hadn't been good. And now, you know, they're tightening up on it from time to time, especially in Florida. It's been kind of a lead to try to tighten up. Of course, Warren Berger, whom I had been with on a number of occasions, said that he would never employ a lawyer who advertised. So I think the commercialism and the fact of all the billable hours and what you have to do to keep records of them and is really changed and taken away, in my opinion, from some of the professionalism of the practice.
Do you or do you not like advertising?
I personally do not. I wrote a memo to our executive committee sometime back when we even got on public radio, and they did it for a while, just said Tate Moore in Marston has been practicing law, and they recommend that you listen to WKN or whatever it was. And at times when some clients have said you ought to give to the symphony or some other charitable group, we've been in our program, but I'm not supportive of it as a firm.
Do you think that young lawyers just starting out?
You know, repeat the question, because when he went to scratch his arm went across the microphone. Just wiped out everything you just said.
I did what?
When you scratched, your arm was over your microphone, wiped out everything you just said.
Oh, did I scratch?
Yeah, you scratched.
Like,
Yeah.
How about, was that on that question?
That was on that
All right, back up. Okay.
Can you edit this?
All right, what was the question? Okay.
Do you favor or do you not favor advertising?
I personally do not favor advertising, even though the Supreme Court has spoken. And as far as our firm is concerned, since you asked, I wrote a memo sometime back to the executive committee. I wasn't even supportive of, even though I listen and even though I contribute to WKNO, the National Public Radio station here and television, that I didn't think it was a good idea for us to have our name on something in the morning saying we'd been in practice for a number of years and we supported public television. And yet we have given money from time to time when a client says, we want you to give to the symphony or we wanted you to give to some other charitable organization, and there'll be a brochure out and they'll list the people who have contributed and our name will be listed in it.
Do you think that young lawyers who have graduated from law school, who are going into practice now, can compete in the business world of law without advertising?
We find that the students now in law school are just as vigorous and hardworking and intelligent as any I've seen in years gone by. And what they do, of course, if they've had a good record, they work as summer associates. Every summer we have jillions of them. And I think that is the main source of our new lawyers. And they come out, frankly, with very fine beginning salaries, believe me. And of course, some of the support for their getting that is that they've had to go through law school and had to incur loans and so forth to make a go and get their law degree. So I think that they're doing well. Now that doesn't cover everyone, and they're going not only into private law firms, or they're going into government, or they're going into corporations.
You have dedicated so much service and so much of your life to the American Bar Association. Not all lawyers are interested in the ABA. Why has it interested you, and how would you sell it to others who do not have an interest now?
Well, you know, recently at a meeting, Jerry Shestak, who is the president, commented, he's done this more than once, that when I was president, over 50% of the lawyers in America were members of the ABA. And I've reflected on that, and I guess that the people who are joining the ABA thought that it was of a benefit to them. I think one of the reasons that people have not been happy with the ABA in part is because they believe that the House of Delegates has gotten into things that are called social questions, whether or not it's abortion, someone on death row, or what it might be, and they think that those are not subjects that the lawyers should be advising the whole world as to the action that they think should be taken. And a number of the people have left the ABA because of that. Now, recently we were at a meeting and Bob Stein, the executive director, seemed to think that the membership was picking up, and I think it's because people think there's help for them in publications, in reading material that they might get, and go into seminars and go into CLE courses here and there, even though they might not be totally in accord with what action the ABA might take. And it's a forceful group, don't get me wrong. I remember when I was privileged to be ABA president, we had a Washington office as well as a Chicago office. That time, I think people didn't realize the number of, we had over 500 employees. And I spent a good bit of my time in Washington going around to see the various senators and representatives about positions that the ABA had taken, and they wished to see this bill passed or to object to this bill or have this bill amended. So that is some of the force that they have. And of course, they, for years and years, at the request of the president, checked out people who have been considered for a federal judgeship, and had the ABA Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary make a confidential, careful check on those nominees.
Do you think a young lawyer starting out in practice can better herself or himself by being a member of the ABA?
I certainly do. There's so much there for that newcomer, and they've got all the publications, all the source of information that they might need to help them in their practice, and otherwise you just have to kind of pick it up. Another thing I think is very helpful, I told you about the senior lawyers division. I've said that the senior lawyers have the experience and the time and the desire to help young people, and these mentor programs have come up on board and being spread throughout the country, and that will be helpful for someone to come in. For instance, Memphis Bar has one, the Tennessee Bar has one, the University of Memphis Law School has one. Recently I had some people up here, and we just sat around and tried to explain to them various aspects of the practice of law that otherwise they wouldn't pick up. That we don't handle substantive law questions, but help them in the general practice of the law.
Here's a hypothetical question. I'm 27 years old, graduate of the University of Memphis Law School. Have got $25,000 worth of school loans, and I want to go practice law in Millington, Tennessee, my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Give me some advice that are some things that I should do to become a successful lawyer in today's climate.
First of all, if I were going to Millington, Tennessee, I would want to find out the best I could if there's a need for another lawyer in that town. I don't know how many they have, and they might be surfeited with lawyers. And then what I think I'd do is go around and see some of those lawyers and see, do you have an opening? Can I by any chance hang out a shingle by myself, which I think is very, very difficult. And that's what I would do, and it might be that there's not that opening there. And then, of course, even before doing that, I'd go to the placement office of the University of Memphis Cecil Humphreys Law School and say, can you tell me what you found out about Millington? Is it a good climate there for a lawyer? Will I have an opportunity? And they might say, oh goodness, they got more lawyers there than they can need right now. Let me suggest that you go to Humboldt or Somerville. You go to see Judge Paul Summers. He can tell you where you can get a good position up there.
What organizations would you, let's just suppose they do find a place, Humboldt, Somerville, Millington. Yeah. What organizations would you advise this young lawyer to associate himself or herself with, and what activities are a must?
You know, that is a good question for this reason. I've told people in this firm forever, you don't get in these organizations to generate business, but I can't think of a single organization that I've ever been in that didn't generate some business. We hope to go out on my boat soon. I've gotten business from the Memphis Yacht Club just because I'm down there and people know I'm a lawyer, and they say, you know, what's this problem? Can you handle it? Or someone in your, and you get it from the church, you get it from bar associations through referrals from all over the country, you get it from scouting, you get it from neighborhood associations, you get it from whether you work with Goodwill Industry or the Rotary Club. All of those things generate, especially if you have some particular expertise and you might write about the article or speak on the subject, so people can have a chance to really see you and chat with you about it. So I tell them to get involved. Get involved. You aren't going to find it'll ever hurt you, and I think you'll find it'll help you.
You mentioned boating.
Yeah.
Do you love boating?
Yeah, I enjoy boating. I've been boating from the time down on the place. I'd even get a little old boat in the bayou and try to dodge logs and go up and down and fish.
Does that come from your having been in the Navy?
No, I think I did that before I got in the Navy because I had this eyesight, and I never could get on eyesight problems, so I never could get on board a capital ship or any ship as an officer, which I wanted to do.
So you didn't have, I mean, most of your naval experience was not in the blue water, but...
That's right. It's always been on the land. That's right.
Well, someone told me that you got kind of got into trouble as you were bringing a boat down from Carruthersville one day.
Whom you been talking to about this stuff?
I told you I did my homework.
All right.
And that I was sure that your Navy career probably was instrumental in saving your life and your wife's life and maybe even saving your boat. You want to share that experience with us?
I got this a 36-foot Trojan out of Florida and had it put on a lowboy all the way over to Pickwick. And Shep suggested you get it over there and have a shakedown cruise and get Mom there so she's familiar with it. Then we bring it all the way around to Memphis. So we got over there after a while, and Shep and I took it through the Pickwick locks there and through Barkley at Turtle Point and up to the confluence of the Ohio at
Grand River.
And then we went down the Ohio, the confluence of the Mississippi, and then came down the Mississippi to Hickman. And Jan, my wife, came up, and she got aboard, and Shep went on back to the office. And the next day I was to go to Carruthersville to get some gas. It's almost impossible to get gas on Mississippi. You can get diesel. And I got in there and got some gas, but before getting the gas, they told me I had to stand off because they had this great big old barge there that had a crane there, and it was lifting up gravel from another barge in order to put it there by a concrete plant. They told us it'd be a half an hour, and it was over an hour. And then we'd dropped the hook, the anchor, and it's right near a whole bunch of stones. And when they signaled for me to come on, we got hit, the hull hit some of these stones, and we didn't know what the problem was, but apparently it damaged the water intake. Well, anyway, we got it fixed, and the next day we started off, and I hadn't gone over maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and I lost both engines, both the starboard and the port engines. And I looked up the river, and here comes this towboat with about 30 barges, and we represent barge companies, and they tell me, Mr. Tate, we can't stop these things in a 7-knot current for a mile and a half. So I told them, please, to dodge me because I dropped the hook, and the current was luckily pushing me over to the east, and it didn't hold right then, so he was able to get by this black buoy and between the black buoy and me, and I got on to the helm there, and lo and behold, all this black smoke started coming all over the place, out the hatches and out the window. So I shut the hatch and got on the radio and called Mayday and told them where I was and what my name was. My wife was with me, and we had on PFD, the life jackets, and I had a fire extinguisher in my hand. I had halon below. They said, is it activated? Do you have to activate? I said, I'm not checking on it. I don't know. I know about that. And so they said, we're sending the city of Carruthers casino boat, the Aztec, to you. So they sent the city of Carruthersville boat to me. And finally, the anchor was about to stop us, and I called the towboat and said, please cut your weight down because I'm running now into a rock revetment to my stern. He said, skipper, no problem. So he put it in idle and went on by, which is good. That casino boat came around, and they were so big, and they had the life jackets on, and they had the fire extinguishers, and they had the swim platforms, and this great big boat that picks up 500 people, you know, and takes them out for gambling and brings them back. They couldn't come alongside this little 36-foot boat. And then they later told me, said, we thought the towboat was going to run you down, so they called another towboat, and they came to me, and they said, we thought you were going to blow up before we got there. Well, everything went well except I couldn't find my wife, Jan, and I kept yelling and screaming for her. She was right here by me, and I had the life jacket on, and I heard this little boy, here, what are you doing? I'm up on the bow. What are you doing on the bow? The Coast Guard said to get up on the bow. We had 200 gallons of gas underneath us, and I'd strapped some extra gas in 12 5-gallon containers on the stern there, and of course I was sitting right there by it, and they didn't want us to have a problem any more than we had. Jan, who was a pretty good swimmer, said that water looked good all the time, looked better as more I looked at it. So finally, this towboat came along and picked us up and took us in, and there were 13 people waiting on shore, and Jan said, the guy in the blue suit must be the mayor. So they came on board and checked us out and said the halon didn't activate. What really happened was, when we hit those rocks, it broke the intake on the pump, sucking the water up from the river, and that meant that 1,000-degree Fahrenheit temperature couldn't be cooled down, and so it just melted everything down there. We got the boat back to Memphis and got it fixed up. But she still goes boating with me.
What's a halon?
Halon is a fire extinguisher that has a substance in it that instead of dry chemical, it sprays something all over the place, and it was down below. It has that little thing at the top of it, just like in this ceiling here, and it melts a little piece of lead, so it immediately goes on, and it would cover the whole bilge down there.
You've painted a picture of success. You haven't meant to, but just by virtue of the facts, it's obviously a successful career that you've had. There are bound to have been some hardships and pitfalls in your 52 years of law practice. Have there been?
You mean in the law practice
Yes.
itself? No, I just think it's been a most pleasurable profession, and sometimes you don't win cases, sometimes you're disappointed with things, and sometimes you even get that psychic income where people are very pleased with what you've done, even though you might not have had a fabulous monetary return. But I think it's been if I had to do it again, I'd do it again. I enjoy it. You didn't ask me about flying and whether I had any problems flying, though. I told you that's my real love.
Tell us about flying.
Well, the last time that Shep and I went up to Michigan, he was late getting out of the office, and I filed a flight plan out at Memphis International, and they told me I was 9th in line. So when they cleared me, I think they sent me to New Orleans before I turned around and headed up. And we landed at South Bend, and we called Jan, my wife, telling her where we were. And then we topped off and got a Coke and so forth. And he said, Dad, I'm going to take the plane back by myself. You take the second leg, too. As soon as we got airborne, we talked with flight service in the Minneapolis center. The country's divided into various centers. And they said there'd been a report of wind shear. And we said, oh, that little Cessna 182 dropped, and both of us cracked our heads on the overhead. So we tightened up the shoulder harnesses and belts. And then the fella didn't seem to know exactly. We had Loran, Mara 3, and everything on the plane, but he seemed to think we were here, and we seemed to think we were here. And he said, okay, Cessna 52600, you report when you have Traverse City in sight. And we said, okay. And when we got up there, he said, I'm going to give you a 1/8 visual, where you come down on, say that this is 1/8 this way, you come down on a 45-degree angle, and then you turn and go up to the end of the runway, and then turn 90 degrees on base, and then turn back 90 degrees, go down on the direction of 180. My wife was down there waiting, and she said later, she said, I was standing next to the guy and said, he's too high. He said, he's going around. He can't make that landing. Well, I didn't know how to handle wind shear. I'd never been in it before, and you're a pilot. So I made a precipitous landing, and just came down very smoothly. And Shep said, Dad, that was such a fine landing. He said, let me shake your hand. He said, Dad, your hand's sopping wet. I said, son, I didn't know whether I was going to get down or not, and I'm glad I got down safely. So that's always a lot of fun.
So that sounds like you had a white knuckle experience.
I certainly did.
Well, you know, you're right. I didn't ask you about flying, but I also didn't ask you about inline skating, kayaking, or hot air ballooning either.
Yeah, well, the funny thing, we went out to, I think, American College Trust and State Council meeting. I think it was out in California, Palm Springs, somewhere. And Jan was there. We went hot air balloon, and she said, you know, I'm about to burn up. My hair's being singed. Well, there's a cloth, asbestos thing that the guy puts on the blower, and he'd failed to put it across. And Jan was right under there, and it was just singeing her hair the whole time. But that was a lot of fun, yeah. I enjoyed that, too.
The people with whom you've worked and some of your family members have told me that when you have any project, you always put 110% into it, no matter what it is. I talked to one person who is a member of the Rotary Club with you, and this individual told me that you had an interesting way of announcing the airplane fly-ins for the Rotary Club. That is, when different members of the Rotary Club who flew airplanes needed to go to some other town for a meeting, then you'd kind of have a fly-in. And this individual told me that you even had sound effects, and that you would get up and would even imitate an airplane or something of that nature. You want to explain that?
Oh, what I do just to get a little attention, I got a tape of some of the air races, and I would get up to the microphone and I'd put it right under there and make all this racket, you know, and it would zoom by and zoom by and the like, and that's, I'm sure, what that Rotarian was talking about. It'd get their attention. And
well, the Rotarian was just making a comment that anything you do, no matter how big or how little the job is, you always do about 110 or 120%.
Well, the thing is, I get a lot of fun out of that and so forth. That's what I was doing.
I talked to your son. I said, give me some adjectives that describe your father. So with that lead in, do you think patience is one of your attributes?
They say that I guess the best quality, it might be the only quality, I don't know, that I have, is patience. That I've been a very patient person all along, and other people say, well, you certainly are patient instead of just ramrodding through, and I don't know, I've always thought that it worked out well.
I've been told that you love the law.
I do.
And the law profession.
Yeah.
And that if you had to, you'd do it for free.
Well, I'd have to live, but I think that I enjoy it that much, I do. It never has been something that I just said you had to make a fortune. I don't think many people go into the practice of law to make a fortune. I've been fortunate in having a good income from the practice, I'll say that.
I've also been told that it's just as important to you to gain psychic income, which I believe is a word that you've coined,
Yeah.
as it is monetary income. Tell us what psychic income is.
Oh, I don't know. It's sometimes someone will call you and is so pleased with something little you've done, and you think, oh, gee, isn't that wonderful that they are so appreciative. My mother was always making up words, and she had a word, myrate. I think she made it up from maybe admire and rate about it, and she would say something, well, did someone myrate about it? In other words, did they go on how wonderful it was and the like? So I guess sometime when someone myrates about something you've done and says, gee, Manny, you just did a great job. We certainly appreciate that. That psychic income maybe buoys you up and gives you a boost that you otherwise wouldn't get from the checks that come in.
What is your relationship with judges over the last 52 years been?
I think I've had a good relation with the judges. Of course, starting off there as a law clerk to Judge Martin, that gave me a real entree. And we remember we were talking at lunchtime when I saw Tom Pruitt. His father, who was on the Supreme Court, was always at any ABA meeting taking me under his wing and taking me into the meetings. And then when I was ABA president, I got an opportunity to be with a lot of the judges, like Chief Justice Warren Burger, who was an very interesting person. I can tell some stories about him. And every judge on our court, whether or not it's Lyle Reed or whether or not it's Bill Fones or other judges, I've just had a wonderful experience with. And recently, they, as you might know, they appointed a task force on the Tennessee judiciary to evaluate our Tennessee plan for the selection, merit selection and retention of judges. And we talked with a number of judges at that time, as well as the media and with lawyers and citizens. And I think, on the whole, people have a very high regard for our judiciary.
Do you think judges ought to be elected, or should they be selected?
Well, I remember arguing in the ABA one time when they had a debate on the Missouri plan. I said I thought it was great that they had it for the Tennessee Court of Appeals, and I'm sure the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeal that you're on, but they did not have it for the Supreme Court, and I thought that was a mistake. And I thought the selection plan would, the merit plan would be much better, and of course in time, not because of anything I said, but I think it's better that they be that way. And the problem is, as you know, it's hard for people to know a lot about the judges, and I think a carefully proposed and creative evaluation, which I think we have now in our Tennessee system, where people can really evaluate and then send the information to a disinterested group, say the one out in Arizona, and have them tabulated and send it back, gives you an idea of what people think about the judges, those who appeared before them and been witnesses, lawyers, other judges. I think it's a good system.
What do you think are the ethical dilemmas of today that you probably didn't have 52 years ago?
You know, the thing that I think is such a problem, when I got in that ABA Standing Committee on Professional Discipline, which I headed, and then on the ABA Standing Committee on Lawyer Competence, I found that people sometimes didn't appreciate or know that there were conflicts. I know on this ACTEC, American College Trust and State Council, I've been for 11 years a member of the Professional Standards Committee. It's kind of an ethics committee. And I remember one time I went around the state with some others talking about conflicts and how would you react to these conflicts. And they're there, and sometimes people just don't know that they're there. And I think the more education we have on what the model rules or the code says, and therefore I think it's important that we are required now under the mandatory system to have 3 hours of ethics as part of our mandatory continuing legal education is a fine thing to have. People sometimes don't realize there's a real problem there.
Shep, what do you view as the role of today's lawyers and law firms in the future? Where are we going in the legal profession, and what do we need to be attuned to in going into the 21st century?
Well, one thing, and it's not something I coined, I think people now have a philosophy of entitlement, and they think and I know that people are more conscious now through the media and the radio and the television and the newspapers of their rights, and so people are just suing like the dickens. And I think, as I have seen it, and I'm not in the litigation field now, but I'm doing some litigation. I'm not saying that this is particularly true. As the cost and delays of litigation, I think are something that have to be constantly addressed, and I think it has to be addressed more by the judges who hold their hand on it and cut down on some of this delay. And I keep hearing from litigators they're doing a better job in the federal system than they're doing in the state system, because I think that that's why you're going to find more and more and more mediation, compulsory arbitration and the like, because they can get it done and get it done more quickly and less expensively.
Shep, in concluding our interview, I'm going to give you one more broad question, and you can answer it any way as you have already, any way you want to. You have had a colorful, successful, and full career. You've been a participant in community activities, church activities, from A to Z. If you had it to do over again, would you be a lawyer? That's the first part of my question.
Answer is yes.
Is there any equivocation whatsoever in that answer?
None.
The second part of my question is...
And I say that because some of the surveys say that people would not do it again, and some of them say they wouldn't have their children go into the law practice.
Now,
But I'd do it.
Would you advise young people to go into the law profession?
I think so. I think it's a great profession and a great public service.
You told me not to ask you this question, but I am anyway.
Can I refuse to answer it, or I mean,
No, you don't have any Fifth
I am
Amendment
in
rights.
contempt.
You have no Fifth Amendment rights. What do you think is your major contribution to the legal profession and to society, of which you're the most proud?
Well, I think that's something that I ought to leave to somebody else. I don't know. I've just tried to be a good lawyer and good citizen and good family man, and I'm sure on all those scores maybe have fallen short, but you can't be always at the top on things you do. But as I say, sometimes my family say they haven't seen as much of me, and then sometimes I think, well, if I hadn't spent as much time doing this or that, I'd be spending more time with my family, and yet if I do some bar work or some community work, then I think, well, maybe am I giving the time I need to give to my profession. So we've had a fine law firm here, and we've had a great congenial group through the years, and I've just thoroughly enjoyed the practice.
Shep Tate, we thank you for your time. We thank you for your contributions to the legal profession. And this concludes our interview for the Tennessee Bar Foundation.
Well, I thank you, and I'm honored that you should want to get my views on this.
It was our pleasure.
Thank you.